Dr. Samar Verma is a senior program specialist of the Think Tank Initiative for the South Asian region, New Delhi. He is a doctorate in economics from Magad University. He is based at the International Development Research Center, New Delhi. Dr. Verma is an economist and trade specialist who has worked as a senior fellow for the Indian Council for Research on International Economics Relations as well as Oxfam GB, where he served as a global head of the Economic Justice Program and senior policy advisor. He was the founding executive director of the Center for Trade and Development, which focuses on policy research, capacity building, and advocacy activities on economic justice, trade, environment, and education issues in the Asian region. Dr. Verma published widely in international and national journals of repute on international trade and competitiveness. May I request Dr. Verma to share his thoughts on CSR, please?
Thank you very much. My job has just been made very easy and also very challenging. Esteemed members on the dais, delegates to the conference. The job has been made easy because a lot of what Dr. Gupta said has almost an eerie similarity with what I have prepared in the presentation. And I wanted to assure all of you, as you go through the presentation, that there is no collaboration between him and I, certainly before this time in making our presentation. And things that will come back in my presentation, terms like nation building, innovative, the quality rather than the quantity of teaching education, CSR law as a new opportunity, taking up long-term program. And here I must say, when he was emphasizing the issue about thinking long-term rather than project-based, in the year 1999, incidentally, sir, I was also at Seoul, and we were having a conversation with Korean companies. That was the time when we were thinking of India 2020 and the vision for India 2020. And I remember having asked one of the chairman of the South Korean motor company, asking him, and I thought at that moment it was a great question that I was asking. I said, what is the Korean vision, South Korean vision 2020? And he looked at me and he said, 2020? We thought of Korean vision 2020 20 years ago. Today we are talking of Korea in 2050. That was an important lesson, first lesson I must say, in long-term thinking, and I'll come back to it as I take you through the presentation. He mentioned also about importance of a very objective process of selection as opposed to an arbitrary process. I'll come back to that again. He emphasized the importance of what we call as concurrent monitoring. So you're monitoring not in a post facto sense, because in a sense, if you do it post facto, the opportunity to correct the processes are already lost significantly. So the modern idea is to do a concurrent monitoring and concurrent evaluation, which he again touched upon. Importance of ownership, not only at the level of the people, the managers of CSR, but also at the level of the governing board itself. Importance of collaboration. So not working in silos, but trying to see how can we get the biggest bang for the buck, as he said. And of course, the focus on impact and outcomes as opposed to processes. And all of it you will see reverberates in what I have to say. So for that reason, my job becomes simple. But then he also made my job challenging, because I'm now wondering what new could I bring to the table. Because he's already said a lot of what I had in mind. But before I begin with my presentation, let me begin by first of all saying that no matter what words I choose to reciprocate the hospitality, the generosity, the humility of Dr. Mishra, and of course the persuasive ability that he has in inviting people, I can never match his skills. it is just wonderful to be here. It's a great pleasure. It's a personal honor to be again standing with you. I was here last year for the third international conference on CSR, and it's a great pleasure to be here again, especially in the presence and listening to some of the best minds on the dais, but also amongst the delegates on latest thinking on CSR and you know, it's also very fortuitous that I'm getting a chance to speak after Dr. Gupta, because as I said, a lot of what he has already said, I will try and re-emphasize in my own way, using my own experience and from programs that I have done. But I must also say that when I began thinking about corporate social responsibility and what contribution I can make, it occurred to me that even though I began my career with the corporate sector, sir, I had the opportunity of listening to the term CSR in 1990s, because the company that I worked with, it's called Arvind Mills, it's a Lalbhai Group company in Ahmedabad. They had implemented a CSR activity, and I was just by coincidence a manager of that program. So when I began thinking about the corporate social responsibility and my contribution to it, I thought I'll probably be least qualified to talk about it. Why? Because I'm no longer associated with corporates. It's been at least 12, 13 years since I had anything to do with corporates. I know my boss in my current organization always complains that I'm not very social. I hardly go to evening parties and get-togethers. So corporate and social is ruled out, and I know my wife who continues to tell me I'm very irresponsible. So responsibility also is ruled out. And I was just wondering, how do I bring myself into a CSR conference talking about these three things? But at the same time, I was also struck by the fact that here is corporate social responsibility, which is primarily a market-oriented initiative, a market-determined thinking, which is being organized by an institute of public enterprise. And the people who have been invited for inaugural session are people who are here from the public enterprises background, including the delegates. Now that is, at one level it appears quite strange, because corporate social responsibility has a lot of its history rooted in philanthropy of corporates, private corporates particularly, and private industrial houses. But wait a minute, not quite. Because there is, in my view, even though Professor Mishra laid out very clearly and very well all of the reasons why he believes a CSR conference is the kind of conference that IP should be doing, I thought there is also a very strong rationale for why an institution of excellence like IPE should be doing a conference on CSR. And that took me to what Jawaharlal Nehru had said, and again very closely echoes with what Dr. Gupta was talking about, the role of public sector enterprises as temples of modern India. And the case that I intend to make in my very humble sort of way over the next 20-25 minutes is on why I think it's time again for public sector enterprises to rise to the occasion and renew their role as temples of modern India. As Dr. Gupta said, to begin to think beyond themselves and think like a milkman and not just looking at profits. And I will use my own example, my own program to demonstrate in my way, try to argue a case why it is important for public sector enterprises to lead the way in the new thinking about corporate social responsibilities. Let me, with those words, begin my presentation. I don't intend taking more than about 20 minutes or so. Could I have the first slide, please? So, the first thing to say is there are 5 key messages I want to convey through what I have to say. One is, the world is now living at the edge of globalization, and I don't think I need to elaborate too much on that. It's very interesting that the chairperson of Alibaba Group of companies, Jack Ma, in World Economic Forum a couple of weeks ago, said that the first globalization was led by some emperors. The second globalization was led by few hundred large businesses. But the third globalization, which is now currently underway and just about beginning to unfold, will be led by millions of small businesses. And I think that there is a very, very clear point that is being made here in the post-globalization, or as some people say, post-truth world. People of the world have recognized and integrated the role of corporate sector in achieving development goals. Think about sustainable development goals. India is a signatory to all of the 17 sustainable development goals. All of the countries of the world are signatory to SDGs and the Agenda 2030. So in the next 14 years, all country governments have pledged to achieve 17 goals. And these goals are extremely ethical goals. These goals are about ethical societies, about empowerment of women. It's about Aam Aadmi, as Dr. Gupta was reminding us time and again. Now, one of the important dimensions of achieving this goal, which again the UN high panel of eminent groups talked of, is what they called as data revolution, or an educated analysis. And I want to emphasize the term educated here, because in the world of social media, increasingly a lot of analysis takes place. One is never sure how much of it is educated, how much of it is rigorous, and how much of it is motivated. So I want to emphasize educated analysis of data, which is a critical attribute and a critical requirement as we move forward to a world where no one is left behind, as SDG says. And in doing so, I want to make a case that think tanks like IPE, Institute of Public Enterprises, and many others play a vital role in both creating the situations for data revolution, that is absolute must if we want to move ahead on the SDG goals, but also educated analysis of all the data with a view to improving the public policy making at all levels, not only in the country but also at the region and global levels. The final message, which is also a key ask of my presentation, is that public sector as modern corporations must renew their legacy of CSR as the new temples of modern India. They have to be thinking of the greater good of society as opposed to thinking only of profits. It's interesting that when we think of SDGs, you may be knowing that the cost of implementing SDGs is estimated to be in the range of $3 to $4 million, whereas the benefits are expected to be in the range of about $12 to $13 million per year. So the private sector is expected to and required to play a vital role in achievement of this. May I have the next slide, please? Now, let me elaborate on some of the key messages. First, it's a grossly unjust world that we live in. And I think Professor Mishra made a very inspiring speech on what needs to be done, on the importance of thinking from the heart and not just from the mind. 8 billionaires owning the same wealth as half the world's population, which is 3 times India's size, 3.6 billion people, is not the kind of world that we want to live in. Is certainly not the kind of world that we want to leave behind for our children. Even as this is happening, 1 out of 9 people every day go to bed hungry. And most of these people are children and women. 3 important events, among others, the Brexit vote, the Donald Trump's election, and the rising nationalist sentiments across the world, have put income inequality higher on the Davos World Economic Forum agenda this year than has been the case in the past, certainly in the recent past. It's a telling statistic that fewer than 10% of public companies account for 80% of all corporate profits globally. And experts believe that this level of concentration in business could deepen unless the third phase of globalization is owned and managed by large number of small businesses. CEO pay has risen 1000% in the United States in the past 40 plus years, while worker salaries has risen by only 11%. These are just some statistics to indicate the kind of inequality that exists in the world. May I have the next slide, please? Professor Mishra was talking about harmonious society, and the role that CSR should play. I personally cannot agree more with that. And incidentally, while he was sharing the example from our own, Ramayana and Mahabharata and Vishnu Puran, I was reminded of a story that I heard during my childhood from my grandmother, which was how when Ravan was shot down by Ram and he was taking his last few breaths, Ram asked Lakshman to walk up to Ravan and take some life lessons from him, because we know that for whatever good or bad he was an erudite man, very learned man. So Ram asked Lakshman to walk up to Ravan and ask him for some life lessons, and he shared several of them. But one of the things that came to my mind, sir, as you were talking about harmonious society and how we need to work to live together, is Ravan told Lakshman that, what is the difference between Ram and me? So what is the difference between Ram and Ravan? I am more qualified, I am more learned, I am more erudite than Ram is. And yet, I am fallen today and Ram is not. Ram is the victorious. That's how history will remember, and that's a fact. You know what is the difference? There's only one difference. Difference is the values that Ram brings as opposed to the values that I bring. I am more learned, I have more knowledge, but my values, I've not had the same mother as Ram has had. And that has made the difference between who has fallen and who has not. And that, I think, has been a very powerful thing that has stayed with me, and I was very strongly reminded of that, sir, when you are talking about the importance of harmonious society. The Sustainable Development Goal clearly is a set of goals which are very, very ambitious, absolutely no doubt about it. But yet, they set our goals high. They raise our bar. They goad us, they inspire us to work towards a common good. Many of these goals are very transformative in nature, and I've just picked up a few things. They're talking about gender equality, they're talking about reducing inequality, they're talking about sustainable consumption and production, peaceful and inclusive societies. They're universal in nature. These are some very big differences from the predecessor MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals. So they are universal, leave no one behind. And they are not unlike the MDGs, which were targets for developing countries to be funded by developed countries. These are goals and targets for all countries, including the developed ones. They are very inclusive. UN reports that they had the largest consultation organized in order to reach these goals. They also talk of means of implementation. We heard about the importance of implementation. We can have very laudable goals, but if we don't have means of implementation, they're only good as they are on the paper. And one important and relevant fact, which is relevant to this conference, is it talks of revitalized global partnership with private sector at the core. As I said, market-based solutions are going to be vital. Governments alone cannot implement SDGs on its own. Corporates must play their part, and the public sector enterprises must rise to the occasion, very much along the lines that we just heard. Profoundly global challenge, SDGs, achieving all of them is not going to be easy. One of the key lessons that we learned from the MDGs before the predecessor of SDGs was that there is a need for available, accessible, credible, usable data for all goals We have 17 goals in SDGs. There are 169 targets. There are 230 indicators. And I'll share with you a few slides just to give you a sense of just the fact that we have so many indicators and targets and goals by itself can be a very, very unequalizing factor in the world. And I'll elaborate on it. Data revolution, therefore, is at the heart of what we want to do. We have to be knowing what is it that we are starting from, what is the baseline. We have to be knowing where are we going, how fast are we growing, is it fast enough, is it rapid enough, what are we missing? And we have to be constantly monitoring, evaluating our progress if we want to achieve all of these goals. Just 3 examples of how data can create and actually aggravate inequality. Of roughly the 230 indicators which have been picked up for the SDGs, half of them lack acceptable country coverage or universally agreed methodology. Half of 230 indicators. Now that itself is a major challenge. Another example is if you pick up an indicator, indicator 1.1.1, which is around proportion of population below poverty line. 72 of 193 UN member states report no data on this since at least the year 2000. And of these 72 nations, 10 are conflict or fragile states, 19 are island nations, and 45 are high-income countries. So just the fact that this indicator has been picked up will ensure that in the current circumstances, if things don't change, there will be a solid group of countries which will be left behind. And who are these countries? The countries that absolutely do not need or need the least to be left behind are the ones which will be most likely left behind, the fragile, conflict-affected island nations. Third example, of 169 targets, 29% are well developed, 54% need to be more specific, and 17% require significant work. Could I have the next slide, please? If you just go to, I'm sharing some data that we have from the think tanks that we work with, including from the institute that we are all here today. If you look at the data availability for just one country, Bangladesh, this is the work that we did for several countries. Unfortunately, India was not one of them, so I don't have the specific data for India, but it will be available in due course because there's work going on. You can see that there is, the portions in red are the ones for which data is not available, and the portions in blue are the ones where data is available. Could I have the next slide, please? If you look at other countries, including Canada, you will see that the adequacy and capacity of human resources to collect data, to collate them, and to make sense out of them, both at the level of the national statistical offices and at the level of line ministries, which is equally important, is extremely restricted. Even countries like Canada fare, they fare quite low on this. So it's a real challenge, and I just wanted to highlight that. Could I have the next slide, please? So then, I kind of quickly want to come back to my basic point, which is why am I talking about data and policy research in a conference on corporate social responsibility? There's a
go back to the previous slide.
Sure. Can we go back to the previous slide? Can you have the previous slide, please? Thank you. Sure. So, this is the red bars are the ones which indicate the levels of adequacy of human resources in respective national statistical offices. So it will be CSO in the case of India, for instance. And the orange bars are the one which indicate the level of capacity of human resources for collecting all the data that is required for SDGs at the level of line ministries, respective line ministries. And of course, Bangladesh, countries like Bangladesh, Senegal, Tanzania, Turkey, no surprises, they are very low. But even a country like Canada is not very high. I mean, they are not adequate. They will need to do a lot of work in order for them to be able to rise to the challenge of collecting all the data that is required for SDGs to be implemented. So, I've just picked up a few illustrations. There's a full-fledged paper that we have supported under under a global program which is called Southern Voice program, because Southern Voice was a collection of think tanks from all of the South, the global South, across Latin America, Africa, and Asia, which came together and, just to borrow what Dr. Gupta very eloquently said, our job as a donor agency, we've always considered, we bring people together. It's up to them to then do what they want to do with that grouping. So what we have done is we have actually brought all these think tanks that we work with together, and they have collectively collaborated, and they've called this program as Southern Voice, which has made a huge contribution to not only the way goals have been drafted, but also the way indicators and targets have been chosen. And they are now moving to the next step of looking at what countries have what kind of capacities to pick up that data, to monitor that data, and eventually to look at whether and how fast are they progressing on achievement of SDGs goals. So all of this is in the public domain. I mean, everything that we support has to be in public domain. That's a requirement of our grant. So all of this is in public domain. I've just picked up a few examples, sir, to illustrate the wider point about the challenges that we have on data. Could we move on to the next slide? So why am I talking about it? Because data analysis, educated analysis of data is critical to achieving harmonious societies, as Professor Mishra was saying. It's absolutely important that we know who we are, what we do, and what direction are we going and at what rate, in order to be able to reach where we want to be. And think tanks, as one of the many, but one very important player in knowledge creation, data analysis, are very powerful instruments, very powerful institutions that play that role. And I've just picked up a few examples to illustrate the kind of powerful influence that think tanks have. Many of you would already be knowing about it, but I wanted to highlight this because not quite often, particularly in the private corporate sector, this is not as much appreciated. So GST, the unique tax, indirect tax that is now, it's just a matter of time before it will become a national policy, was first proposed by Professor Chadha, who incidentally was also my teacher in college, at NCAR several years ago. And of course, NCAR ever since has been lobbying for this. That was the first paper that was done using a general equilibrium model on GST, which has been implemented in the government. Creating a national profile of India's youth, another think tank, Center for Study of Developing Societies. There are many things that these do. I've just picked up a few to illustrate the wider point about the power that these institutions have on public policy making and using rigorous evidence to support that. So they have created a national profile of half of India's population, which is less than 25 years of age. And that, I think, is a very, very powerful, and I can talk about in detail, but that has been picked up again by the ministry, and this is particularly important because there's so much of discussion happening about employment and youth in this country. Whether the demographic dividend turns into a demographic disaster is critically dependent on our understanding of what is the national profile of India's youth. Another organization in Bangalore, CSTEP, Center for Study of Technology and Policy, has been working on and has indeed enabled the creation of wind energy mission in the Planning Commission. In addition to working with the Bureau of Energy Efficiency on creating a new market-based mechanism, perform, achieve, and trade, PAT mechanism, for improving energy efficiency in large energy intensive industry. That has been picked up by Bureau of Energy Efficiency and it's being implemented. Similarly, not many people might know, but the fact that the government wanted the private sector to start hiring in a very affirmative way people from disadvantaged groups was actually brought about by one study from an Indian Institute of Dalit Studies based in Delhi. They were the ones who pioneered this and who lobbied and very strongly advocated, which was then picked up. All of this is obviously based on rigorous data. So these are not anecdotal stuff. This is not just an advocacy tool. It's based on huge rigorous research by eminent researchers. Many of you are here in IPE. NCIR again, land pooling is something that has been adopted by the Ministry of Urban Development in Delhi. And the entire concept of land pooling and the several models were developed at the NCIR, through a grant by the Ministry of Urban Affairs in Delhi. Again, health insurance for those with HIV and AIDS. Institute of Economic Growth has done a remarkable work on all of this. I know that Institute of Public Enterprise also has been influencing the government with its research, not only through consultancy, but also being on several important committees that Professor Mishra, I know, is already on. But there's an important role that Institute of Public Enterprise play, which is the link between research and teaching, which I want to particularly emphasize because, again, as Dr. Gupta was saying, it is important that it's not just about good teaching, it's about what goes behind that teaching. It should not, unless the teachers are aware of what the current state of research is, it's going to be very difficult for them to be able to teach the right and the most contemporary method. Next slide, please. So just to quote a few, leading lights on this. Vijay Kilkar, who was an IAS officer and of course served in several important committees, recently at C.D. Deshmukh lecture last week, in fact, was saying that in open societies such as India's, more knowledge leads to better policies. There should be research on the Indian economy and Indian society, for which we should be encouraging independent policy think tanks. Likewise, Gordon Allport, who was the professor of psychology at Harvard University, when he was talking about the difference between sciences and social sciences in the preface to his celebrated book, The Nature of Prejudice, as far back as in 1953 said, and I quote, "Social science cannot catch up overnight." And I want to emphasize the long-term perspective that, again, Dr. Gupta was talking about. It required years of labor and billions of dollars to gain the secret of atom. It will take a still greater investment to gain the secrets of man's irrational nature. It is easier, he said, to smash an atom than a prejudice. None of us can agree more with that. I just wanted to highlight that, to suggest a few things about the role of think tanks, the important role they play, importance of research, importance of linking research to teaching, and importance of, therefore, think tanks as knowledge creators and as mobilizers for improved public policy making in countries like India. Next slide, please. Now, who would you think is the biggest user of policy research? Not many people, certainly not in the corporate sector, from my own interaction I know, appreciate this. But the biggest user of policy research from think tanks is the government itself. And I'm now going to quote a few studies, including a study which has been done by this very institute. Professor Mishra, several of the colleagues here have been responsible for doing the first study in this country, 65, 67 years old, on what is the level of funding that goes into social science research. But as biggest user of research, just to cite a few data that has come out from a study done by a think tank called Institute of Economic Growth in Delhi. So there were 666 references to social science research which were cited in 200 policy documents of just three union ministries: Ministry of Human Resource Development, Ministry of Rural Development, and Ministry of Women and Child Development. Of these 666 references, 37% were discussing policy context, 55% were on policy analysis, and 43% were on policy preferences. I think the data is probably wrong somewhere because they don't add up to 100. But again, if you look at the 307 references of these three ministries which are mentioned in the 11th and 12th five-year plan documents, 67% were cited in policy context and 33% for policy analysis. This is at the union level. Even at the state level, another institution, think tank, Center for Economic Studies and Economic and Social Studies, CES, in Hyderabad, in this very city, did exactly similar work at the state level influencing, and they found that a very similar, considerable influence of think tanks on public policy making in this country. Next slide, please. Yet, unfortunately, and this is where I want to bridge what I have to say with the corporate social responsibility, particularly of the public sector enterprises. Unfortunately, the government funding for think tanks is very, very low. The total government funding for the latest year that data could be made available, and this study was conducted by ISEC in Bangalore, again, another think tank. In 10-11, the entire funding from union and state government for social science research was an abysmal less than 500 crore, 486 crore only. For all of social science research, it was only 486 crore. No, approximately half of that came from the Ministry of Human Resource Development, as nobody will be surprised. Of course, I'm excluding the work that the government does on data collection. So census itself, for instance, would typically be between 2,000 to 2,500 crores. So I'm excluding that. That's a data collection work. I'm not including data collection. I'm just talking about policy analysis, policy research that government support is in the range of 486 crores. Now compare that to international donors. And this is a work that I want to particularly highlight, and personally, as co-editor of the book in which this is published, I want to express my sincere gratitude to you, sir, Professor Mishra, and of course, team here at IPE for having done this work, which I know, being one of the international donors, how difficult it is to track and extract that data. But I think your researchers did a commendable job in doing this, because this is information not only to the wider public, but also to us as international donors. Total for just 10 international donors over 7 years was nearly 2,000 crores is the total expenditure on social science research of about 10 international donors for which data could be collected, which is equivalent to almost 60% of all social science funding coming from public agencies, from government in this country. I will not make a judgment on this. I will certainly not issue a statement on this, but I certainly think it's a very telling statement as the biggest user of policy research, and yet not funding public policy research. So what is the solution? And that's where I wanted to talk about the program which is called the Think Tank Initiative, which interestingly is a public-private initiative. It's an international community, so Government of Canada, Government of United Kingdom, Government of Norway, and 2 international private philanthropic foundations, the Gates Foundation and the Hewlett Foundation, have come together to initiate this program in 2008-9, which is called the Think Tank Initiative. I consider myself very fortunate to be managing this initiative in Asia. This alone has committed 100 crores to only 7 institutions in this country. I mean, we work across large number. There are 43 institutions that we support in 22 countries. But just in India, in 7 countries, 100 crores are committed over a period of 10 years. It's not an insignificant amount of money. And if you talk to the think tanks, I can tell you it constitutes a significant strength to these institutions. Now, why is this a strength? Next slide, please. you can see, as I said, eerie similarities between terms that Dr. Gupta used and nation building. Clearly, think tanks are an important agency towards nation building, towards the greater cause, greater good. And public sector in this country, as temples of modern India, have played that role. All from 1950s, 60s, 70s. I mean, I, for one, am of the opinion that the economic reforms that could take place in 1991 was not because public sector had failed, but because public sector had succeeded, is my opinion. And I'm happy to talk about it perhaps in a question-answer session. But I certainly believe that public sector undertakings in this country have laid the foundations for private sector to take off. They were never meant to earn only profits. So therefore, the comparison between public and private sector is unfair when it is done only on the parameter of profit. But the key principles of think tank initiative program, and all of these very strongly echo with what Dr. Gupta was just saying. So, which is about you're thinking long term. So first of all, it's a public-private collaboration. It's happened at international level. You can see private, and this is part of CSR work of Hewlett and Gates Foundation. And this is where the governments of Canada, Norway, and United Kingdom have joined hands with them on a common vision. The common vision is you strengthen knowledge creators, you strengthen knowledge creation. Why? Because knowledge must underpin good public policy making, and public policy making is key for good governance, for achievement of sustainable development goals, for a harmonious society that we all want to move towards. Now, what are the key principles? And I'll quickly list them because they have been quite well elaborated by Dr. Gupta himself. So what we do is we provide core non-earmarked financial support to think tanks as grants. So we don't do, as Dr. Gupta was cautioning, we don't do micromanagement. We don't start getting into what heads of expenditure have institutions spent the money on. That's not what we do. The process of selection is very rigorous. We spare absolutely no stones are left untouched in trying to get the best foot of these institutions forward when the process of selection happens. It usually takes place about 1 to 1.5 year long process. And institutions are informed well in advance that there is no guarantee and the process is going to be rigorous and it's going to be internationally competitive. So you have to excel. But once you excel and you have demonstrated your commitment by being part of this process for 16 to 18 months, we trust you. We trust you for what you believe in. We trust you for your ability to deliver on what you believe in. We give them a grant of a reasonable size. Reasonable because we don't want to give them a grant of 100% of their annual budget. Why? Because what we have seen is 100% grant to think tanks, and unfortunately many of the ICSSR supported institutions suffer from that. They become like a bicycle. They just kind of go back to sleep, if I may say. It's a very lazy life that they begin to lead. So we want a good mix, an optimal mix of being very, very fleet-footed, and at the same time a comfort and space to create, to experiment, to take risks. And what from experience we have found is roughly 1/3 to 1/2 of the annual budget is a good optimum balance. That's what we've learned from our experience. Ownership of funds by think tanks is again a critical thing that we look at. Is it owned by the institutions or is it owned by the director? Director is not the institution. Governing board is not the institution. Staff or managers are not the institution. The institution is entirety. All of the staff, whether from research, non-research, teaching, consulting, governing board, and of course the management, are part of the institution. So we ensure through several processes, we ensure that the entire thing is owned by the institution. So everybody is committed to a shared goal, a shared vision. After the process of selection, the process of monitoring is concurrent and it's very light touch. We don't go, every now and then asking for long reports or long detailed expenses. We trust them, as I said. It's a big leap of faith, but it has paid. It has paid off handsomely. After 8 years of experience, we can tell you, as managers of the program, even the external evaluators who have evaluated the success of the program have come back to say that it's been a remarkable and a very successful experiment at the international level. And then, of course, we also provide some sort of technical capacity building support. Next slide. And this is my last slide, please. So, what do I have to say finally? Frans van Houten, who is the CEO of the Philips Group of Company, at Davos 2 weeks ago, said something very interesting, and I want to quote. Returns do not come within the quarter or even within the year. We need to have the courage to follow a longer-term North Star to truly achieve progress and create real value for all stakeholders. And honestly, in this country, if there is one group of institutions who knows this best, it is the public sector enterprises. No other group of institutions know the importance of long-term thinking, importance of building foundations, and importance of patience when looking at accountability. It's important to keep that in mind. I just want to conclude by saying that we know that the market-led globalization has created a very dangerous world. I mean, we are seeing symptoms all across the world, not only in the neighborhood, but also as far away as United States. It's important that as part of the corporate social responsibility work, the public sector enterprises rise to the occasion and show the path to the private foundations and private corporate sector enterprises on what can be and must be achieved if we want to build a better India, a better society, and a better world, not only for ourselves but also for our children. As Finance Minister Arun Jaitley yesterday reminded us of a Gandhi's quote, "A good cause can never go wrong." And that is my plea to the public sector enterprises, CSR managers here, and that's my plea to people who are engaged with the public sector enterprises. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Verma. We thank you for the brief presentation on think tanks' initiatives towards promoting social science research, and I hope IP would collaborate in future research if an opportunity is given to us. Shri S. Sridharan, an Executive Director, NLC Limited. Shri Sridharan has formulated various CSR policies for NLC, and he has formulated identity manual for NLC, introducing the theme and the logo of NLC. He was instrumental in conducting various functions, seminars, conducting NLC book fairs during the Diamond Jubilee celebrations of NLC India Limited in 2016. He has served the Central Public Information Office for a period of 10 years and has also represented NLC in many cases before the Central Information Commission. Shri Sridharan also holds the responsibility of CSR initiatives at NLC as an executive director, and during his tenure he has served various activities of CSR, and he was instrumental in introducing the diploma in mining course in Annamalai University, providing RO water purifier systems and generator sets in the heritage workshop places, in development of water bodies in NLC townships and industrial areas, in the construction of toilets throughout Tamil Nadu under Swachh Bharat scheme, and in construction of classrooms for schools and buildings for the hospitals in the nearby region of NLC. Shri Sridharan is also a recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award by the Public Relations Society of India, National Chapter in 2016, Earlier, he also holds the same prestigious award for the year 2014 and 15. We request sir to throw some light on the CSR initiatives at NLC.
Good afternoon to all of you. I wanted to say, first screen my movie on CSR and then talk about what NLC feels about it, because I'm totally a PR fellow, so more of doing what the government sees. I'll show you a small thing after this deliberation, what our minister spoke about NLC and CSR, what my chairman feels about CSR, why we are driving fast, where we are driving towards. And thank you, Dr. Mishra sir, because I don't know whether I can share the stage with Dr. Madhukar Gupta and Dr. or Dr. Raj sir, all secretaries, Government of India, and all other learned, all the people in this are PhDs and doctorates. So it's really, it's very difficult to speak some statistics and all. I'm not going to give you any presentation, nothing. Clearly what our Additional Secretary told, it has to be attended by all directors and CMDs of PSUs. Because the information which he gave is enormous. It's not a joke, it's a reality. We also don't know much of the things, what the government thinks about implementation of CSR and PSU. Sir, I will request you to come to NLC India if possible, so that we will have a session with you regarding CSR with all my executives and throw some limelight, because lot of things, what we are doing, we are not able to project it properly. So in that way, we need that. And with regard to Dr. Mishra Saab and IPE, even I can learn a lot. Like my NLC colleagues are there. He was with our almost previous 3 CMDs in the board. He was in NLC board. Even if you say have a contest today, at Kishore told, who put his tie very fast, you have to learn from him. I will challenge that nobody can wear the tie in the speed in which he used to. So basically I avoid wearing all these suits because of the tie only. So many people have taught me how to wear a tie, but I am not able to master it. So that amount of precision he does. And regarding IPE, NLC funding and also, you just don't bother about it. And we are always with you. Nothing to say this thing. I'm not, I don't have the approval of my chairman, but I know his mind, clearly. And other thing about IPE, I have coordinated with them for my RTA seminar, everything. And I will look forward, Dr. Mishra Saab, to bring our Additional Secretary there to NLC, so that our people, our executives, our senior people must know that what is CSR, what the government thinks about CSR and all. And thank you very much for giving this opportunity. And I will request our Additional Secretary sir and Dr. Mishra Saab to allow me to screen a small movie. It will come for 6 minutes. Thank you very much for giving this. Thank you very much.
For 60 glorious years, NLC India Limited, formerly Neyveli Lignite Corporation, has been a forerunner among public sector undertakings in the energy sector, contributing to a lion's share of lignite production and a significant share on the thermal power generation. The unique feature of NLC India Limited is its twin objective of mining and power generation, which it pursues with excellent record of performance. NLC India Limited is a Navaratna Government of India enterprise coming under the administrative control of the Ministry of Coal and a pioneer provider of India's energy security with a rich history. NLC India Limited operates 3 open-cast lignite mines of total capacity of 28.5 million tons per annum at Neyveli and 1 open-cast lignite mine of 2.1 million tons per annum capacity at Barsingsar, Rajasthan. NLC India Limited operates 4 thermal power stations of 2,990 megawatts capacity at Neyveli and 1 thermal power station at Barsingsar, Rajasthan with an installed capacity of 250 megawatts. 1 coal-based thermal power plant NTPL at Thoothukudi of 1,000 megawatt capacity, a joint venture project of NLC India Limited and Tangetco.
Mahatma Gandhi had said, be the change you wish to see in the world. Don't just preach to the world, act yourself. Do what you are preaching to others. And I can see in NLC that spirit of doing good for society, of doing good work so that the world can see India as a responsible global citizen, caring for the environment, working for a better future for the people of India. I must acknowledge the children who have taken Swachh Bharat mission seriously from 2nd October, this effort to clean the entire environment, to keep the entire precinct of Neyveli and the neighboring villages clean has been taken up. Today we had almost over 1,000 children going in a march for creating awareness about Swachh Bharat, which is a dream of Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi. I am delighted that NLC has become an active part of this dream. I compliment each one of you. In fact, ever since I have landed in NLC, I have found the highest degrees of cleanliness and swachhata, for which I must compliment all of you.
CSR. The company takes care of the surrounding population in terms of health, in terms of education, in terms of infrastructure. It partners the government in providing all these facilities to the people in surrounding areas, and also it is allowed to the social responsibility it has to discharge in the areas wherever its presence is there. As a part of the CSR responsibility, this company believes in bringing in the things which are very necessary for the surrounding population to be comfortable and taking care of the people coming from the lower economic strata. For augmenting water resources, we are deepening and desilting the existing water reservoirs and water bodies, creating new water bodies, and also laying the canals for the irrigation of large tracts of land surrounding our mines and projects.
Recharge zones were chosen at Karikalakuppam, Nadiyapattu and Maligampattu villages, and check dams, percolation wells, observation wells and recharge wells are constructed. Desilting of lakes and increasing the storage capacity of tank, perennial supply of irrigation water to 200 villages.
இந்த தண்ணி வந்து என்எல்சி நிர்வாகம் தாங்க வந்து வெட்டி கொடுத்தது வாய்க்கா. இந்த தண்ணியால் வந்து கிட்டத்தட்ட ஒரு 10 கிராமம் 15 கிராமம் பலனடையுது.
Opportunity Society, which runs a special school, Sneha, for special and differently abled children from Neyveli and surrounding villages, imparting special education through specially trained teachers. NLC India, harnessing energy, spreading smiles.
IP has been always working with NLC. We have a chair instituted by NLC, and we thank NLC for that, and hope to collaborate in various initiatives of NLC on CSR. We have with us Dr. A.K. Rath. Sir has always been a motivating factor for us to conduct various international and national seminars at IPE on special areas of CSR and CG. Let me briefly introduce Dr. Rath to everyone here. Dr. A.K. Rath is presently the chairman and professor, Center for Corporate Governance and Social Responsibility at IMI New Delhi. After superannuating from the service, he has taken up academics as his passion and started collaborating with various institutes and has been contributing to the society in promoting education. Dr. Rath has joined IAS in the year 1973 and has held various positions during his tenure in various ministries, departments, and government portfolios. He is instrumental in promoting the universalization of elementary education through national flagship program of Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan during his tenure as Secretary, Department of School Education and Literacy, Ministry of Human Resource Development, Government of India. And he has been a Special Secretary and Financial Advisor, Ministry of Steel, Government of India, and Director on various boards of public sector enterprises, such as RINL, Kudremukh Iron Ore Company, Mecon, SAIL, NMDC, etc. We are very fortunate to have you in our midst, sir. I request sir to say a few words on his thoughts on CSR, because he is going to talk to you in the next session on the board responsibility embedding CSR into business strategies.
Good afternoon, friends. Dr. Misra and eminent speakers on dais. Now, cue from my two great previous speakers. Now, Samar, my dear friend. Now, he spoke about the temples of modern India. I have worked in temples and also working in temples for last nearly 25 years. But the temples and the PSUs are unlikely to perform the great task which you are giving them. Dr. Misra is here, he knows. I consider the Indian PSUs like giant flying machines waiting to lift and fly, but strapped to the ground by the owners. The owners have bound the machines to the ground. With all potential, with all capacity, with great professional people in the company, they are not likely to perform the duties you are giving them. Unlikely. I've been trying it for last 20 years' time. Dr. Misra has been trying for last 20 years' time. We haven't succeeded. And we are unlikely to succeed unless as they say, the cat bells itself. And Oh, you're all mouse. Go and build the cat. I mean the owner, the people who are in power. Now the mouse has to give up efforts of belling the cat. The cat has to now rise and by self-regulation bell itself or herself. I hope you understand, all of you are experienced people. That day is to come, Samar, till your vision of the great role of PSUs may come. Now, you also talked about sustainable development goals. You are in the field, 17 of them, which replace the Millennium Development Goals. What are these goals? Climate change. Example, the governments are unlikely to do climate change. Again the companies, corporations, MNCs, Indian, global, they have to perform. And not by law, but again by self-regulation, help in the process of, let's say, climate change, poverty, employment, all that. It is again a question of ethics, not law. Because you can't expect the MNCs of the world to be bound on by any law to do SDGs. And SDGs will not take place unless they do by voluntary work. As an ethical person, as an ethical company, as a global corporate citizen. So that brings to the point. I may be a lone dissenter, a voice of minority, but I feel very uncomfortable with CSR being made a law. Very uncomfortable. And what has happened? After CSR has become law, the total spending, average spending by Indian companies, both PSU and private sector, are about 1.5% average, nowhere near 2%. In spite of 3 years being there, in spite of DP having issued guidelines in 2010, making it binding for the PSUs, it is still the latest report of Economic Times and IIM Udaipur is 1.4% average. So what has law done? Maybe same amount was happening earlier also. In fact, because law is flawed. How? Law has given on the right hand something and taken away with the left hand. What? You spend at least 2%. Next, the board may decide to spend less. Give me reasons. Reasons can be given. My expansion coming in, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So, law is very flawed. Law is not going to help. It is the voluntary spirit which will going to be the deciding factor, subject to owners not binding down the companies. Now, the law has done one more, let's say, created one more problem. It has created a constituency fund, which the owners, quote unquote, would like to use it for the constituency. You do it here, do it there, do this, do that. This is not CSR. This is tax. And you spend money on tax, from tax. Fine, you do it. Make it 2% tax. 30% is coming down to 25% by finance minister announcement. Corporate tax is coming down to 25%. Fine. Add 2% CSR tax, make it 27%. Let PSUs do, let companies do, let MNCs do. Beyond that, that is CSR. I give a paper on this aspect. The ethical foundation of CSR. CSR out and out is voluntary and ethical. You are free to tax it. You are free to tax companies, but don't call it a CSR. Now, one more damage is being done. Dr. Gupta was, I like the presentation of Dr. Gupta and some or both, but they listed everything is there in the list, Schedule 7. But mostly it is education and health. Almost half the money, 24% for education, 20% for health, is going to this, fine, should go. But other sectors are not getting any attention for reasons best known to the people. Now there the board role comes very important. The role independent director can be important. Can you really expand your menu to items not covered? Although I don't, the law is there, you would obey, but even the defective law can be implemented better way by the board, and unfortunately, boards are not center stage in CSR. I have gone around the country, I have talked to many PSU companies, I also work for them as a consultant. Boards are not center stage in CSR. Well, we have created, talking of PSUs, summer, we have created GM CSR. He does it. Board sometimes asks questions, wants to know. Why? Have you spent the money? If not, why not? That's all. Is there impact? No. We don't bother about impact. 31st March is our deadline. So create that much climate to spend the money. Now, these are issues which must be addressed before we can have a meaningful. Therefore, CSR has to remain a purely voluntary. Around the world is voluntary. Now, friends, I'll speak more when I come to my presentation, but issue is the corporation. Who has created corporation and why? What is corporate governance? Who has created, who has defined, and why? What is CSR? These are all thread from corporation to corporate governance to CSR are threads. You cannot talk of CSR without corporate governance. If you do not have good corporate governance, you are not having CSR. And vice versa. If you have good corporate governance, you have automatically CSR. It flows like a chain. Now, corporations are, many authors have criticized the creation of corporation. In fact, one author was saying that the defective flying machine, not designed to fly as per the laws of aerodynamics. And what is corporate governance? It's an incomplete manual, not complete. What does the board do? Well, board is given the work. Does it do? We don't know. So there's no manual to enforce that board does what is intended to do. You cannot. In fact, Samar said the minutes are publicized. I think Madhukar said, we are not publishing minutes. It's confidential. Minutes are confidential. What does the director do in the boardroom? Nobody knows. What does the independent director do in the boardroom? Nobody knows. So it's an incomplete manual. And the owners are out. Owners are not in the boardroom. They don't know what's happening. Now, unless and until you make these structural changes, in fact, people visualize that the defective flying machine with incomplete manual still has to perform because there is no alternative. Unless we invent alternatives, it is perform. Who performs? The executives, managers, CMD, independent directors, companies, they have to perform. Now, I have seen companies after companies where bulk of the executives are not in the know of their own company's achievements in CSR. They don't know. In fact, in one program like this, in Northeast, I won't name the company, big company, great company. I asked the DGMs who had come for a course on CSR, what is achievement of CSR of a company? The reply was, we don't know what they are doing. We and they, that CSR and non-CSR. Somebody is doing CSR, so he knows about it. He doesn't tell me. There's no communication. There's no pride. There's no nothing published. It is as if job of a DGM or GM CSR. Now, can we communicate to our employees, executives, that this is a pride for the company? Can you talk about employee volunteerism? People are willing to go and work. Do you have a policy to encourage employees to go to a school and teach? They would like to go. We don't have. Many global companies introduced employee volunteerism. It's a subject of research. Can you not do it? Then you have a ethos, you have a philosophy of the company that yes, we also are part of outside society and we must contribute. Talk about the Tatas. Now, they have been in the area of CSR from 30s and onwards. In fact, the dispute that you find in the Tatas, Tata Sons and the CMD, Mistry and all that, there is one aspect which is being missed. It is the social project, the CSR projects of the Tatas which are having problem because the new management doesn't like. The basis of Tatas is the CSR. The companies began to finance the CSR projects, scholarships, TIFR, TIS, Universal Science, all that. Now, it dried up subsequently after new management. The funds to the original trusts dried up. The dispute started there. I mean, basic point is this. Of course, you can have personal issues, but the very spirit of Tata was lost. And therefore, the dispute came. And today, Economic Times 2015, 2016, successively are publishing, they are doing the rating of Indian companies, both PSU and private. And the rating shows that PSUs are losing ground. They are nowhere in picture. 2004, 2003, when I was in Madhukar's seat, a joint secretary in the department, I had gone to Dr. Mishra over there also in All India Management Association, 2003-04, if I remember. There, the PSUs were the leaders in CSR. Today, they are the bottomers. I'm sorry to say that. But spending is not the only thing. Nobody judges you as spending. What is the impact that you are spending on education? What is the impact? So if you see the impact factor, we are losing. I think if this is to come back center stage, not spend money, but create the impact also. Now, the rating of PSU in the top 10, we are nowhere in the picture. I think one PSU figures in top 10 or top 20. The whole private sector. Small companies have come up and gone on top of PSUs. Now, this is a message we must see, because people are judging us differently. Independent agencies are judging differently. You may agree, don't agree with them. I don't say that they're final. You may differ. But there's a point of view. The point of view is that you may dispute that, fine. But the point of view is that perhaps you are not creating, or you are not creating the impact that you can. I think I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
We have with us Dr. Jibidesh Radji, General Manager, HRD, NMDC. And we also look forward, sir, every time whenever we do a conference, a training, for all his support and encouragement. And this conference is also been funded by NMDC, apart from the NLC chair, which is an auspicious chair that has been instituted at the institute. Thank you very much, sir. I just try to introduce him very shortly because sir is going to be here with us and we will talk more about sir in the next sessions to come. Dr. Rath has 3 decades of experience in the area of HR and CSR. He holds an MPhil from JNU and a PhD from Utkal University. Prior joining NMDC, Dr. Rath served various PSUs such as NM Midhani and SAIL in various capacities. And he has also been awarded various national and state level awards in the area of HR. A dynamic leader is with us. I request sir to say a few words on CSR before we conclude the session. Thank you.
Respected previous speakers, Dr. Barma, my mentor to say Dr. Rath, A.K. Rath, Dr. Misra, my elder brother, guide, Mr. Samar Barma, Dr. Barma, Mr. Siddhar, and my dear NMDC participant on CSR group and all faculty and participants. Indeed, I'll be very brief because I will not talk about NMDC. In the second session, there is NMDC presentation. But we have not 5 speakers, we have 2 extra speakers. Thanks to Mr. Siddhar, he brought 1 minister and 1 CMD in the inaugural session through video. That's good. And he saved time. But only one point I will lay, bros. Because Dr. Barma, Madhukar Barma, Additional Secretary, inspired all PSUs because I was with him last 20th of this month, January, on HR policies in Scope Complex. I told there, because the HR policy cannot be formed in isolation than CSR policy. I am working in a company, NMDC, which is operating in the liberated zone. We don't want visa to go there. This in India, we don't want to go that visa, but unofficial visas issued by left-wing extremists, and we produce iron ore, #1 company, single largest producer iron. That's not issue. Issue is what we do. Company spends money. The NMDC steel plant is coming because of CSR at Nagarnar. Tata tried, SR tried, they didn't get a inch of land. We got 2,000 acres 4 years back. Almost the plant, 3 million ton plant is going to be start only because CSR. We are producing iron ore because CSR. So community volunteering is a new thing which missed on my previous speakers. They could not touch because of lack of time. What we do as a personal capacity, what I do, what you do, that is CSR for me. Not what my company is spending, what think tank is spending, what government is spending, that is not CSR. We should think beyond our thinking process. That's the CSR, what I do. For example, President Obama became president only through community volunteering. He started his career after passing an intern, meeting his would-be wife through Chicago neighborhood activity and community volunteering. And he'll go back to community volunteering after being president, 8 years successful. That is CSR. That's what Warren Buffett saw the light. He was a richest man. He became second and third. That didn't matter for him. He wanted Bill Gates to spend some time with him, just because Bill Gates told, I have no time. I ultimately gave 5 minutes time to meet Buffett. But he spent 3 hours. And Bill Gates Foundation came after that on CSR. Warren Buffett is becoming richer and richer. 80% of income is spending on community and CSR, and still he rich, still has billions of dollars. But our #1 industrialist in India is competing with Trump Tower to make Trump Tower bigger and bigger, Ambani Tower, having 30 floors swimming pool, 40th floor helicopter pad, landing pad. That's the difference between India and this. So my submission is what I do, that's important. But one thing, sir, I want, people talk Davos, Dr. Barma talk about Davos. But we should not forget World Economic Forum Davos, every year we meet at Switzerland, WEF. But I joined, or I spent some time with WSF. World Social Forum. You know that there's a World Social Forum to counter Davos, WF. They are a forum. Imagine, I got a chance, Asian Forum, 15 years back. So my baptism with that, so many poor NGOs, these, that, all the world are gathered in Nizam College ground. And they had a world forum of social forum at Mumbai. They had a Rio. They had different, Johannesburg, different places. So there you get the baptism of CSR. Last point. He is the Chief Commissioner of Scout Guide of the state. I was the Chief Commissioner of the district of Dantewada, small, big district. So that is community volunteering. Now I am looking after Scout Guide, volunteering. Sir, one example I will give you in Dantewada area, Dantewada. You know Dantewada, every day it is news. Because Dantewada came in news every day, Naxal firing, civil war, they divide their district. At least other part of the district name will come, Sukma, Bijapur. So that is Dantewada. So there what happens, we started, just one example, because with the public sector, without public sector funding, what we did, that is Pota Cabin. That is a case study in World Forum now in the net. Prevention of terrorist activity, that is volunteering, Scout and Guide. We adopted Pota Cabin, that is school, education, Raji mission. Because the CRPF, CISF people or CRPF paramilitary staying in the school, they bombed it. This looks like they bombed. But so they started a very makeshift Pota Cabin type bamboo structure. The schools, where students, orphan children, those fathers, parents died in civil war situation. So they are adopted, the schools, through Scout and Guide. Because we know that if 10 people are not socially inclusive, they will go back to jungles. They will raise arms against the nation. If they are not gainfully educated, so all the things. So that is only we don't talk about CSR, what funding, what is the percentage, this, that. That is there, that is important. Last point, because before lunch, of course you are not clapped, so you should clap, I should stop. So last point is for me, that's interesting, madam, we are talking about CSR. Dr. Gupta has very nicely, and that paper also, Dr. Rath's paper also talked, but one point is now challenge for government is MMRD. I am from mining sector, Mines Mineral Regulatory Development, that Act 14, now is classing with, somebody told, sir, you class with CSR fund, where you will spend, because district development boards are there, crores of money is available from mining companies. This money is available. I told that you go to, very correctly told, Schedule 7, it is clear. So that government policies to be implemented properly, that's the challenge. Last but not the least, I just told Dr. Gupta and government, okay, take a second, not 1 minute, half minute. Because HR policy, I'm telling, because CSR, sir, is only company, NMDC, I must say, you should know, we recruit people class 8. No PSU recruits people class 8, below 10. Why? Because that's a company policy that will not be under CSR, technically. But we do CSR before the man joins, Adivasi. The illiterate Adivasi, we recruit. That's not under CSR, this is a company policy. But we train them who operates 25 crore shovel, who operates 10 crore dumper. So that is the social re-engineering we do. Government can do many things, that's all. So we will again meet after lunch, our officers will spend a lot of things, talk a lot of things. I am thankful that last 4 years, I am sitting that side. For the first time, I am upgraded to this side by default. So that's thanks to IP. I will not forget there also. Madam Singh is there. She has defected to University of Hyderabad. She has defected recently, assistant professor. She was here. Our team, they are working. Thanks to IP, thanks to all my previous speakers.
We have a book release. The conference compendium is brought out as a book. I request Kameshwari to take the books to the guests. The book titled CSR Driving a Sustainable Future, edited by Professor Mishra and Shulagna Sarkar. And the book is published by Academic Foundation. All those people who have contributed to the conference by sending papers, the papers have been included. It's an edited volume. I request all the dignitaries to join Additional Secretary Dr. Gupta to release the book. Thank you. I now request Kameshwari to hand over another book, Social Science Research in India, which Dr. Samar Verma was mentioning. IP has contributed in the think tank initiative along with the social science institutes in the country with IDRC. I request Additional Secretary Dr. Gupta to release the book. I request all the others to join him. We have recently relaunched our institute profile, including the latest that have happened at the institute. I request our dignitaries to release the institute profile also. Thank you everyone. On behalf of the institute, I request former CMD BDL Sri Mantaji, who is a faculty member at our institute, to honor Additional Secretary Dr. Gupta with a memento for his valuable time and beautiful presentation enacting the various aspects of CSR to every one of us. I now request Professor Satish to hand over memento to Dr. Samar Verma. I now request Dr. Shulagna to hand over a memento to Sri S. Sridharan, Executive Director, NLC. Thank you so much, sir. I request Deepthi to hand over a memento to our beloved Professor Rath, sir. And I request Shulagna to again hand over a memento to Dr. Jibitesh Rajji. Thank you for your valuable time, sir. I hope we will have the opportunity to listen, everyone. I request Deepti to propose a quick vote of thanks.
Honorable Dr. Madhukar Gupta ji, respected Dr. Samar Verma ji, respected Mr. Sridhar ji, Honorable Professor A.K. Raj and Dr. Jibitesh Rajji, respected Professor Mishra, and our most valued invited guests and ladies and gentlemen. I, Deepti Chandra, on behalf of Institute of Public Enterprises and the entire organization, even special guests in the audience here today, extend a very hearty vote of thanks to all speakers for gracing your important work and sharing with us your findings and opinions today.